Welcome into the KINGSBEAT podcast, a Blue Wire podcast. I am James Ham, Kings Insider for ESPN 1320 and the Kings Beat. Joining me today, Fox 40, Sean Cunningham. Sean, how are you?
I'm great. We're back. It's been a busy few weeks. It's actually been a really busy few days. I mean, I just got back and forth from 49ers training camp. So I'm kind of shifting a little bit more into the NFL and football at this time of year, but good to see you guys. Haven't seen James in a long time. I saw Brenden kind of recently.
Okay. And of course, we have Brenden Nunes from the Kings Pulse podcast. Brenden, how are you?
Doing well. Joining you guys from a undisclosed remote location.
Blink twice if you're okay.
No, can't reveal any details.
Shoot.
But yeah, everything's been good on my end. Been a second. We definitely got a lot to talk about.
Yeah, we do have a lot to talk about. For starters, if you're watching here on YouTube and you don't mind, hit the thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel, do all that stuff. Jump on board with the Kings Beat. Go to thekingsbeat.com. I think next week we're going to do an off the record with the Kings Beat virtual happy hour. And then I'll explain. We haven't done a podcast for 2 weeks. We're at the California Classic. Sean and I were sitting next to each other. We got to late in the game, and all of a sudden I couldn't swallow anymore. and it went on for a couple of days, and then I realized that I had strep throat. And so I lost my voice for a better part of a week. I was able to do a little bit of radio, but not a full force of radio. And then last week, while I was still recovering and still on antibiotics, I actually went to Mexico with my wife for our 25th anniversary. So, yeah, we just turned 25 years last week. And so apologies that we haven't been producing as many podcasts as we normally do during the summer. But James sometimes life gets in the way, and it is 100% my fault. I couldn't talk at all last 2 weeks ago. So just kind of a bit of a train wreck. But here we are. We got a ton of stuff to cover. We'll dive into everything from the DeMar DeRozan stuff and what that means to the latest addition in Orlando Robinson. But Sean, we'll start with you. The Sacramento Kings have added an assistant coach today. We were talking before, this has kind of been in the works for a few days, for a week or so. But go ahead, and what do you got for us on Jim Moore and the latest addition to Mike Brown's staff?
Yeah, I mean, most recently with the G League remix from Rip City, which is obviously a Portland affiliation. And, he's had service in Portland and Detroit, both with Terry Stotts and under Dwayne Casey, and has a wealth of experience and some knowledge, and he'll be coming over to the Sacramento Kings bench. I know Mike Brown has been eager to add to his staff with some departures, notably the 2 assistants that went to Brooklyn under Jordi Fernandez. And of course, you still have a G League opening that with the Stockton Kings, because Lindsey Harding has gone to the LA Lakers under JJ Redick. And, she was even up for head coaching consideration, interviewing in Charlotte. And so there's creates opportunity for promotion, which I think will happen with G League. I think, to me, it makes the most sense to, they promoted from within for the G League job before. And I think somebody like Will Scott might make a lot of sense there. He was the associate head coach to Lindsey Harding this last year in Stockton. So I could maybe see that happen here sometime before September. But yeah, with Jim Moran, you just add some more experience, and I don't know how many more slots they're willing to fill. I know they had a ton of coaches learning from them during the summer league. I mean, you even had Tony Parker's brother who was over here. But you've got, during both the summer league for Vegas and California Classic, you had 2 teams for California Classic, and you had a lot of people that were on both staffs. So be interesting to see who slides over and gets to add to the bench, and see who kind of makes their way through. But Mike Brown had talked about, meeting with a lot of people both in Las Vegas and in Sacramento, holding those interviews. And this is the most recent one today, is Jim Moran being added to the staff.
Yeah, so like they lost Dutch Gately to Brooklyn. They lost Davidas Dolkis, and of course Jordy Fernandez all went to Brooklyn. Dutch Gately, like, not to take anything away from Davidas Dolkis, but Dutch Gately is like the guy who has been really, really instrumental in their development staff. He's run the development squad there, which is like a really, really pivotal piece, especially if you're going to bring in young players and try to develop two-way players like Keon Ellis or second-round picks like Colby Jones, stuff like that. So that was a big piece, and from what I know, Jim Moran is going to take that role in Sacramento. You also they brought in Ricardo Foyce earlier a couple of weeks ago, so they have actually started to build out the staff a little bit more. I think Jawad Williams is somebody who is very highly respected and regarded within the walls of Golden One, and I expect him to sort of start moving up. But yeah, I think, maybe Mike has one or two other coaches that he might bring in, but I don't think there's going to be a huge addition from here on out, especially not like a front of the bench person. Brenden, you've caught a ton of G League games. Do you have anything on Morin or the, like watching the remakes last season, or did you miss those guys when they rolled through town?
Yeah, honestly, not a bunch on Morin, but on Foy's, kind of asked around on him a little bit. And my understanding is Mike Brown has a really good relationship with Mark Few, Gonzaga coach, and that he spent some time, Ricardo, that is, at Gonzaga when Domas was there as well. So a pre-built relationship from that aspect. And he's coming from Arizona, where he was an assistant coach there as well. So definitely some familiarity with these guys. And when we talked to Mike down in Vegas, essentially kind of what Sean was getting at, he was saying that he's a patient guy when it comes to this process, but that he's been meeting people, whether that was California, Vegas, wherever it may be, to try and fill out this staff. And for anybody concerned about people leaving, I think this is nothing but a good thing. It speaks volumes, as Mike would say, about his staff and the work that they've done, that they're getting opportunities in other places. And I think he's well liked enough around the league that these spots will get filled for sure.
Yeah, I totally agree with that sentiment. Like, this is a good thing to lose coaches. Like, you haven't lost anyone who didn't get a promotion. Like, everybody is moving on to bigger and better things, and that's sort of you want your guys to do. You want them to have opportunities. And like, look, there wasn't a bunch of front of the bench opportunities in Sacramento. The one that came available when Jordy left was instantly going to Luke Laux. He's a guy who's put in the time with Mike Brown, who is highly regarded by Mike Brown, who coached the summer league squad last summer, and just a guy that, like, I think, again, a lot of people around the league and around Sacramento think very, very highly of. So like, sometimes you need to reshuffle a little bit. I learned through this process that there is, like, your front of the bench guys and then your back of the bench guys, but like, there's actually like numbers sort of associated uh with assistant coaches. So like, you can be like the 8th assistant or the 6th assistant or the 5th assistant, and the goal is to sort of move up when you go take other jobs. And so I think everybody who has left has moved up, whatever where they were in Sacramento. They've all taken steps forward in their career, and that's a good thing. That's pretty big. You guys were both in Vegas. What was your just overall takeaway from the Vegas experience with this team? Was there anyone that stood out to you that you're just like, man, they got to figure out a way to get this guy on the roster, or did it just feel like your standard, summer league fare?
Yeah, I'm typically a summer league guy. I like to think that,
Really?
I be at a lot of this stuff, and this was a tough watch, I guess we'll say. Sat next to Sean for most of these, and yeah, they were tough viewing experiences, and I think that that's the case with a lot of G League games for sure. But I think the lack of a traditional point guard was really felt on that Kings team. Just not somebody to orchestrate things out there. 31 turnovers, and I believe it was their first game in Vegas. Ugly one. I didn't have to see that one. Sorry that Sean did. And there were a couple others that got pretty gross for a little while there. But I think little moments of like Keon Ellis's ball handling, I thought there were some moments that stood out to me, running a pick and roll, hitting a pocket pass. I do have some questions about Colby Jones. There's only so much you could take from Summer League, but I would have liked to see a little bit more. And as for like a more under the radar guy that stood out to me, I'm a big Boogie Ellis fan after that. I think that the energy that he brought defensively, Doug said it after one of the games that we had good energy out there, but it wasn't Boogie energy. And Boogie out there wearing 15 for what it's worth. But I think that he did provide that defensively, and then you know what he can bring on the offensive end as well. So not talking about Sacramento spot, but I think it's important to get quality guys in Stockton too. And if they continue to grow, reward them. And Boogie shared that I believe Alvin Gentry, I think it's his son, is on the USC staff. And so a little bit of familiarity there. And he said Alvin's a big fan of him. So he's definitely the one that I would say stood out to me of the non-roster two-way guys.
Sean?
Yeah, the biggest takeaway for me was Brenden related, but I guess we can leave that aside for now. But
Ooh.
Is it when I correctly guessed Billy Joel and you were shocked?
Oh man, I almost lost some money on that one. Yeah, that was pretty wild. No, I think Brenden hit it there. I would say certainly wanting to see more from Colby Jones. Actually surprised that in my mind that Keon Ellis was in Vegas to play. He didn't stick around for the last two games. I mean, he stuck around, but he wasn't playing in the last two games. And I think he ended his summer league career on a high note, certainly, especially that game against the Knicks really stood out. That was impressive. They wanted to put some of these guys like Colby and Keon in a position to be primary playmakers. Even Mason Jones, who, as Brenden noted, no true point guard out there, and Mason was about the closest thing as they had, but wanting to see how they could kind of run the show and handle an elevated role than that they would normally play in Sacramento. So, it was a little janky. I think it was the other little disappointing thing was I didn't really get to see a lot of moments from the new two-way players, the Isaiah Crawfords and Isaac Jones. I mean, Isaac, certainly you can see some moments from in terms of ultra athletic ability, some pretty dunks, some blocks, able to have just be all over the place, be kind of an annoying factor out on the floor. But certainly offensively, I think there's some things that will definitely need to be developed. He can be a little bit of a frustrating player on that side of the ball as well. But I think he's somebody that if you're going to check in on Stockton this year, your eye might gravitate towards and totally see what he's capable of, because he's got a whole lot of big time plays and just really highlight worthy plays that come from him. So he was both kind of a blessing and a curse in a way. I mean, you certainly see some frustrating moments that we're going to need some development from him, but I was kind of hoping that there might be a little bit more of toward the positive on that. And then, I'm with you on Boogie, but I think Adonis Arms too was just a big breath of fresh air when it came to activity. I think his passing is really top shelf. And, he unfortunately had to leave summer league in Vegas a little earlier. I'm not sure totally what happened there. I had heard a few things, but nothing that I'm really confident in reporting or even talking about here. But definitely liked what he brought to the table, and interviewing him was really fun. I mean, he's got a lot of personality. So even from the media game, that would be a nice addition to talk to from a young guy trying to make it and kind of find his way. He's talking about all these ways that there's no blueprint in making it to the league anymore. And you see a lot of G League success stories, and you look at his path and it's kind of all over the place. So that one was certainly a kind of somebody that drew my attention as well.
Yeah, it's always a bummer. I think that the G League, it sort of does mirror Summer League in a lot of ways. If you don't have a really good point guard, you have a very difficult time having success. And I think the Kings over the last decade, whether it was like David Stockton or it's Jordan Ford, it doesn't matter so much if they are true NBA prospects. If they know how to run a point and they know how to control the tempo and slow things down when you need to, and they know how to set up guys, then you're just a better team. And so I think it would have helped to have sent a true point guard with them. And I get that they wanted Colby and Mason and Keon to maybe get some of those reps. But that doesn't change the fact that like when Keon gets to Sacramento, there's not going to be a time he can bring a ball up the court, but there's not going to be a time where he's your true point guard. Either Malik Monk or De'Aaron Fox, or name that other player, Jordan McLaughlin. They'll be a point guard on the floor with Keon. And so I get wanting to like expand his role and everything. And I didn't think he played that poorly. I just think he was playing sort of out of sorts, out of position, if that makes sense. And then the other thing is I thought he had a lot of fouls, but I liked his fouls. I thought, except for the one that cost him the game. But outside of that, I think the fouls that he was committing are that's how the NBA finished last season. That's how you could go out there and really be aggressive in the last half of the season last year. And I thought that Keon was sort of carrying that through and not taking a step back and saying, "Hey, I'm going to try to play to whatever's going on here. I'm going to play how I'm going to play with the parent club next year." And I thought that that was a good thing.
The other thing I'll add is I think that it was a good learning experience for Doug. He was really hard on himself after some of those games, saying, I need to be better, whether it's about timeouts or his messaging to the guys, whether that's through media or just talking to his players. And I think it was a good learning experience for him, the same way it was for Jordy in the year prior. And it seemed like the team sort of took on that identity. Like Mason, super hard on himself after some of those games where he was pretty good, but I think he had a big turnover late in the one against Washington, I want to say it was, and definitely beating himself up after the fact, but in I think what would turn into a motivational way after the fact. So they definitely seem to embrace Christie's identity, personality, I guess I'd say. And I think it was a good experience for him too.
Yeah, I mean, these are valuable pieces to like not just player development, it's coaching development as well. I totally believe that. What were you guys' thoughts on Drew Timmy? Because like what I saw of him, like there's a lot to like. There's also like the limitations of Drew Timmy, like that you can see like all over the court. But for me, if you want to sort of mirror what you're doing with the parent club, with the G League club, and running a bunch of DHOs and running a bunch of like high level passing from the top, from the high post, Drew Timmy does seem like a guy that might fit like what you're doing, and having him in training camp might actually be a good idea to have him work against a guy that, he knows, and Domantas Sabonis, but someone that, can maybe help him like sure up some of that stuff. I don't, was there enough positives from Drew Timmy to make you guys like be intrigued and say, hey, maybe they should get this guy to Sacramento?
Uh, no, not really. I mean, I don't mean to be as blunt. Like to me, I think, um, he's made a lot of strides in the G League, and I think I still look at him as being a G League player. I don't know if he's gonna. I think it's gonna be tough for him to become a true NBA player. But he has a much better feel for the game than I certainly remember. I think a lot of it too is, I don't feel like he has the best size out there. Like he doesn't like I know he's listed at 6'10" or whatever, but there's not one time where I thought he was 6'10". He kind of plays a little bit smaller than that. Um, he's not very long. He I still think he's gonna try to fit in where he can, but this system might be the best um thing for him where he can play like a Sabonis. And if they brought him into Stockton, I think there could be a blueprint for him to get to the NBA, even to the Kings, based off of the style that they play, because it mimics Sacramento. That to me, that might fit very well, but I don't necessarily look at him and think that he's a guy that, in my mind, that would be in the mix for a roster spot. There were some things that I saw out of him that were both positive and negatives. But to me, I think overall, he came in and tried to play the right way. I think there was a lot of things that I thought he added some nice things, but you can tell, like, to me, his biggest step forward that he's made from the past 2 years is just that feel for the game, knowing where he needs to be within the offense. I love the fact that he can grab the ball and just go. He doesn't pass ahead. He can bring it up himself. He's comfortable in his handle that way. He didn't, dribble himself into any really poor situations. But I think also just within the half court is where I thought I might need something a little bit more quicker from him. So there's there's some good and bad there. I think ultimately if I'd probably bet against him, but you know, wish him all the best. He's a fun guy to talk to. He certainly is a fun presence out there, and he made the most of his summer league opportunity. That's for sure.
Yeah, I'm pretty much on the same page with Sean here. I think that some of the defensive stuff makes me question how it would ever really work at the NBA level. Just the size, not the great foot speed, not, there's not rim protection there. There's not like a switching ability that really stands out or anything like that. So that's where my questions lie. But I think when it comes to Stockton, the same way we were just talking about, it's important to have a point guard down there to give, like, you're really primarily focusing on 6 guys max really with the Stockton team, and giving them the best context for what would be translatable to the next level in Sacramento is important. And I think Timmy could kind of feel that, I guess, practice squad domos in a way for the G League team. And there's value in that. And, he could get a better offer somewhere else, but it's not somebody that I'd really want to necessarily put assets towards from Sacramento standpoint. But I do think he could have some value in Stockton.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like, look, I'm not saying give him a roster spot at all, but I do think a camp invite where you gave him a little bit of money to make sure that he can stick around in the G League for another year, that might make some sense. And you would also, he's like, as far as G League rights, if I'm not mistaken, he's property of the Wisconsin Herd. And so in order to get him, like, even if you brought him into camp and he was one of the last guys waived, he still would go to their G League system. So you'd have to figure out a trade. And the Kings did that last year with a bunch of players. They went out and, got the rights to Scal and maybe like 3 or 4 other players like during the season where they went out and traded for. I just think, like, again, Scalabisi had a great season last year for the G League. I thought he was really good. But a guy like Drew Timme might be more valuable to your program, not to winning at the G League level, but to your program where you're allowing guys like Mason Jones or Colby Jones or, name that player that's going to be at the G League level that might be able to play some minutes at the Kings, the Sacramento level at some point. At least you'd be able to follow like sort of the same blueprint a little bit more than you can right now with the assets that you have. So either way, like, he was fun to watch. Like, I thought he did make some nice plays, but I saw the defensive limitations, the fact that, like, a phone book is like a tall task for him to get over. Like, he's not a leaper at all. But neither's Kelly Olynyk, another Gonzaga guy. And could Timmy, develop into someone who can at least like hold his own in certain situations? Maybe, maybe not. Anyway, was there any other grand scheme takeaway? I like what you guys talked about with Doug, because I haven't got to talk to Doug about the experience, but I would like to know, like, how much he thought he learned from the whole situation.
Yeah, I thought Doug was brutally honest, which was great. You could tell. I mean, he was talking about sleepless nights over summer league. You could tell how much it meant to him. He wanted to make the right impression with the organization and with these players, and it kind of forced me to look at him a little bit and like see not only what could be maybe as a head coach, but it made me wonder if Doug. I don't know that he would do this now, but I wonder how much he would have benefited from being, maybe last year being the Stockton head coach, maybe making himself, putting him in a position to maybe take over that club for a year to, and I think that's probably a bridge. I kind of think that probably wouldn't happen now. I think he kind of means too much to the organization and to Mike Brown's staff, obviously being a front of the bench guy. But I couldn't help but kind of wonder like what that might look like and how much that could benefit from him or benefit him and benefit some of those players as well. So yeah, I mean it was a good opportunity for him. I think it's interesting how he kind of wore some of that, some of those moments. But I hope he's able to look back on the experience fondly. I know him being a competitor, he's going to look at their record and not be happy. But you were able to kind of escape Vegas with a win, so that was, I think, at least a good thing to take away and know that, could have been a lot worse, and you were able to kind of overcome some of that adversity, particularly that first game, as Brenden mentioned. That was one of the most atrocious summer league performances I've ever seen, and I've seen a lot. I'm not a fan of summer league basketball per se. I usually use it to hone in on a specific player or specific situation, and that game I wanted to throw up right on press row.
Yeah, it does feel
Terrible.
like if you're looking at summer league, it's kind of like watching preseason football, NFL, and then thinking that it's going to help you with your fantasy football draft. Like you definitely, I'd bring up the Colby Jones thing. I think there should be concern because Colby didn't stand out. He had a game where he stood out, but overall, between the California Classic and Vegas, there was like this want for more, like the whole time. And I think sometimes that can be because, again, he didn't have a natural point guard. It could also be because like the type of player that they had that he is, they had multiples of like again, Keon or Mason Jones. They all kind of play the same style. Well, I'd say Keon's more of a catch and shoot guy, but the other guys they play sort of a similar style of play. And it's like there's only one ball. It's hard to stand out when other guys like Arms is getting the ball or Boogie Ellis is getting the ball. Like they all kind of do the same thing. They're like guys who need the ball in their hands and they create for themselves and a little bit for others. So yeah, I think that you can be concerned about someone in summer league, and you can also look at someone and go, okay, they're way too good for summer league. But then everything else is kind of like, okay, I'm not going to put too much stock into a guy averaging, 16, 18 points a game in summer league, and somebody's got to go sign him right now type deal. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Kevin Knox putting up numbers in summer league for 8 years now, 7, 8 years now.
Yeah.
That's wild.
He looked like
And he's still,
yeah, he looked like he'd added like a whole nother Kevin Knox to him, and he's still super skinny. You're like,
yeah, and it's crazy because I remember that game with the Warriors on Wednesday at Chase Center, and I'm like, God, this guy. And then he went out there and kicked the King's ass. Like he was he was really good
well,
in
he
that game.
should. He's been in the
Yeah, he
league
should.
6
I mean,
years.
absolutely.
Yeah.
But it was funny because I kept thinking, I was like, boy, I'm not really a fan of Kevin Knox. He's really been a disappointing player. Really hone in on him and watch him kind of go to work. And then you're like, not only did he kick the King's ass, he played like a guy that like the Kings could probably use on their team. He was physical. He did a lot of the dirty stuff and was still able to score as well. So even extending the floor a little bit. So I'm not taking too much away from one summer league game, but my goodness, that's what he should have done. I think back to Colby for a second. Like certainly last year was a better fit for Colby, and maybe it's because that team fit his playing style a little bit better. You mentioned maybe having a point guard and things like that, but there was only really one game. Here's the thing, like last year, Colby Jones could play a game. He didn't have to score, and you felt his impact in the game. I felt when Colby Jones didn't score this season that I didn't notice him like at all. He wasn't rebounding. He wasn't, stealing the ball very often. He wasn't contributing a lot in other areas of the game like he had in previous years. And I kind of joke if he could be a guy that went out there and gave you like, 7, 7, and 7 or 6, 6, and 6, like even with like 3 steals and 4 whatever, like that could be hugely impactful on a team, especially the Kings. So at any rate, I just didn't feel his presence in any other portion of the of summer league except for that. I think that was that game against Utah where he scored like 19
25.
first half points, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
19 of them coming in the first half, and kind of felt like they went away from him a little bit as well.
I think it's that balance of being aggressive, but also maintaining the ball movement, like the equal opportunity offense that Sacramento has in California. I think Doug was calling for him to get up 6 to 8 threes, somewhere in that range. And that would happen seemingly like every other game. And I think sometimes it's about, you are one of the guys on that team specifically, go out there and find a way to make an impact. So definitely wanted to see more, but not going to jump to too many conclusions quite yet.
Yeah. my buddy Kyle is the president of the Colby Jones fan club, and like you can't just give up on a kid after a rough summer league, but
No.
he is going to need to start producing pretty quickly, and I don't think he's like going to produce at the NBA level whole bunches here, just because I don't think that there's a lot of roster spot for him. There's not rotational, opportunities for him, but still, like you would like to have seen some growth, and I was a little taken aback by just how he didn't stand out, in a positive way, except for the one game. So,
Yeah.
um,
By
the
the way,
yeah, go ahead.
obviously not having a point guard, Devin Carter being hurt and obviously being around the team for the majority of Vegas was good. You know, they probably bet that they were going to have Jordan Ford. As they got down there to Vegas, right before the first game, he signs with New Orleans for a summer league spot, and things that I had heard in terms of uh, the team offering him an Exhibit 10, and hoping that he would be in that situation for Sacramento, um, for a G League spot again. But obviously, I think he felt that he'd be in a better running for a roster spot or a two-way spot in possibly New Orleans. I know there's a couple other teams that had interest in him, as well as if it doesn't work out overseas. So I think the team may have already been kind of situated in a way where maybe a late scratch of not having Jordan Ford hurt them in terms of the point guard play.
Yeah, and I think that that's something. It's kind of interesting. The Kings don't have any two-way spots available.
No,
They gave Slauson and Jordan Ford's two-way contracts to other players. What is it, Isaac Jones and
Isaac Jones and Isaiah Crawford. Yeah,
there we go, Isaiah Crawford. Yeah, there we go. But I'd also point out that just because you aren't on a two-way contract, or I mean, just because you are on a two-way contract right now, the two-way contracts, from what I know, number one, they don't count towards a salary cap at all. And they also, you can just like end a two-way contract and go get another guy. So
right.
I don't know if guys stood out enough to hold on to their two-way contracts. Certainly, I think Mason Jones did. But also, like, those things are pretty tenuous, the two-way contracts, and the Kings could go in a different direction if they so choose. Whether that happens or not, I don't know. Like, there are other players out there that maybe they do look at for two-way contracts. Like Dominic Barlow is still available, from what I know. The San Antonio Spurs, like, young power forward that I think is like super intriguing, and every time we saw him at the California Classic, he's lit everybody up, um, and then he's kind of just floating out there as like a restricted, but not really, because he's a two-way player, restricted free agent. So definitely interesting. What do we make of Orlando Robinson? The Orlando Robinson signing, 6'9 3/4", without shoes, 7'4" wingspan, long, athletic, played for the Miami Heat for the last 2 seasons. But where are you guys at with this signing? Should it, and I haven't heard anything at all on the dollar amount, but I'm gonna guess that it's not fully guaranteed. Maybe I'm wrong there, but it
No, it's
seems like
probably a good
that's,
guess.
yeah, it's probably like a moderate guarantee for training camp, and then after that, it's like it won't be guaranteed until January 20th, and we'll kind of have to wait and see. Any initial thoughts on him?
I mean, a guy that similarly, I think, does really well in the G League and Summer League. Remember him at the early California Classics playing extremely well. And like, if you just want to look at, it's only 9 games played for the G League last year, but 24.3 points, 11.7 rebounds on 57.5% from the field. He's taken some threes in there, 37.5%. Again, small sample size because he does great down there, comes up to the NBA level with Miami. I think he's played less than 750 minutes total throughout the course of 2 seasons. So not really been able to break into their rotation, while they've had some backup center questions of their own at times. So I think 24 years old, it makes sense. Yeah, I think that it's the third string center was a need on this roster, and a guy that could potentially develop into more if he fits well in your system. Maybe a little bit of a pick and roll that could be worked on with Malik Monk, who we see runs that well, or whatever the second unit may look like this year. But I would still definitely put Alex Len above him. But I think there's intriguing stuff there that you would hope that. I think the ideal outcome is that he fits better in Sacramento, is able to show some of those skills more than he was in Miami.
Yeah.
I don't really have much more to add to that. I want to see him play. I want to see him, go back and even watch more of him. I haven't seen much of Orlando Robinson. The last time I heard his name, I remember he played for not only the outside of the California Classic. The last time I heard his name, he was playing for Fresno State. I remember he was a pretty solid high school player. He played at Centennial, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, that's a pretty prolific place. And then he bounced around a little bit, went to like a private academy. But yeah, SoCal kid. Be interesting to see how he fits. I know he can be disruptive, but I don't know a whole lot about Orlando, so I'm gonna look to put a fine tune comb on the guy and watch some of his stuff and kind of go back and watch. That's the beauty of the G League. You can watch a lot of their games in full instead of just seeing some highlights. So definitely want to see how that looks, and I'm intrigued about him stretching the floor. Being a long body that can stretch the floor, it's exactly what the Kings need. So if he ends up being another G League success story, that could be fun.
Yeah, he at Fresno State averaged 19.4 points, 8.4 rebounds, shot 35% from three, and he took over 100 threes in his final year. So, I mean, he can shoot it, and it's kind of like shown up at a little bit at the pro level, but not a ton. So, yeah, I'm intrigued. It's kind of like what is it? Isaac Jones. It's kind of he is a little similar to that, except for he has got a much better stroke from the outside. So I don't know. He's at least intriguing. What, 24 years old? Again, we don't know what kind of guarantees are on that contract, but I'm going to guess it's not a lot. And like I think it's something worth noting. If he is on a guaranteed contract, that puts the Kings at like 169 million plus, and it puts them. It's actually like 169 point like 6 million. It puts them not even a like a rookie minimum scale contract player away from the luxury tax. And so that's going to be something that
With
I'm kind
a
of
roster
intrigued by.
spot open,
Yeah,
with
with
still
a
another
roster
roster.
spot.
Yeah,
Yeah, if they okay, so people know that if you signed anybody like from anything past your first year. So if you sign a rookie free agent, you can sign those guys to like a $1.7 million, $1.8 million contract rookie scale. Anyone else, so Alex Len, it on paper he makes 3.4 million bucks, but in salary cap purposes, for luxury tax, for all those purposes, his salary only counts like 2.2 million. So anybody above their rookie year gets basically they count against the cap as if they're a second year player, whether they have 17 years of experience or 4 years of experience. So the Kings still have a little bit of play here, but not a lot. So if Robinson isn't the guy, I kind of expect them to sign more than one of these types of players to bring to camp and kind of see who they're going to keep. But I also wouldn't expect them to keep all of them because they are going to be right up against the luxury tax. And another sort of silly thing that happens with the luxury tax, the luxury tax is a little below like 171 million. If you go above that, you become a tax paying team. And so let's say you go above the luxury tax by 5 million bucks. So you have to pay 5 million in salary for that player. On top of that, you have to pay dollar for dollar, so $5 million in luxury tax dollars. So now that player is costing you 10 million, not 5 million. And then on top of that, if you go above the luxury tax and you're a tax paying team, you don't get the payback from all the teams that go above the luxury tax. That luxury tax money goes into a pool and gets redistributed to teams that are underneath the luxury tax. And so this year that it's a little under 12 million bucks. So if you go a dollar over the luxury tax, from what I know, you are no longer available to go get that 12 million bucks. So a $5 million player costs you 5 plus 5, so 10, and then 12, so $22 million for a $5 million player. So that player better be good, and it better be someone that actually moves the needle and not just adding someone to add somebody. So I would caution people that are like, hey, why aren't you spending? Why aren't you spending? It's like the player has to be worth it at this point where you're at. And he's got to be someone that might play in the rotation. So whether that be a trade or something else, like you would want to like have a good reason to go above the luxury tax. And this team is now hard capped at 178 million bucks. They can go up, but they can't go way up, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So we never did get to talk about the DeMar DeRozan stuff because I got sick. And yeah, sorry. Like I got sick and then I went on vacation. But where are you guys at with just like it seems like one of the better short-term fits that I've seen for a team. I don't think that there's a lot of negative to it, other than the fact that I don't think you got better defensively, but I also don't think you got worse defensively. But like, what were your initial thoughts when it was DeMar DeRozan and Brenden? What do you got?
Definitely caught me off guard. I think initially the fit was a little weird to me, and I think thinking about it more offensively, it definitely makes a lot of sense. I think obviously being a read and react offensive sorts, adding high IQ players seems to bode well for the most part. The lack of shooting that he has, I think that sometimes off when De'Aaron's trying to drive, I think that could clog the paint up a little bit, but you kick out to DeMar and he's open. He's going to take a one dribble jumper, or he might shoot that corner three, which he's done okay at times throughout the course of his career. But running DHOs, I think is going to be smooth. I think that, you just, instead of staying along the 3-point line when he gets the screen, just curl a little bit, you get right to his mid-range spot. The playing in transition will be a little bit new, but I think the common idea is that actually makes the game easier. And DeMar's definitely a high IQ player that I think will do fine in that aspect. I think also the clutch scoring, it almost seems like you're trying to get back to those elite strengths that you had in 2022-23 of being one of the best offenses in the league and being one of the most clutch teams in the league as well. And defensively, it's where obviously a lot of questions still remain with defense and size, but it sounds like they're banking on that physicality being allowed more this season that had them 9th post All-Star break in defense. I don't feel so comfortable relying on that, but there's definitely logic to it. So I think that it is kind of doubling down on your strengths that weren't necessarily elite last year, and having an elite skill is really important in the NBA. So makes sense. And it's a clear talent upgrade, undeniably, although the 2031, I believe it is, swap could look bad in a couple years. It also could look like nothing.
Who gives a shit? It doesn't it doesn't matter.
I mean,
you're adding
could look horrible.
No. It doesn't matter. Here's the thing. You didn't give up anything for him. It's an talent upgrade. And I think I froze. Did I freeze? I'm back.
You're all right.
Sorry,
go ahead.
It's an undeniable talent upgrade that you didn't have to with respect to, those players, Duarte and Harrison Barnes. Like, you didn't have to give up anything for them. You're giving up things that you literally looked at your roster and said, here's a weakness. This isn't getting any better. We already know what this looks like. This person serves a purpose. This person still trying to work their way back. If I can get rid of both of them and bring in a guy like DeMar DeRozan, who is absolutely what you need. We've talked about it, a wing player who can go and get you a bucket, become a three-headed monster, add to be one of the best players on your team, and you didn't give up anything for it. And if you're talking about a pick swap as being really the most valuable piece you gave away in 2031, I don't care. And so to me, it's not about DeMar DeRozan necessarily, because I think there's other pieces I would have liked. Certainly, Brandon Ingram, Lauri Markkanen, and those guys you'd lose your mind over, but you would have to give up a fuck ton for those type of players. You're not doing that for DeMar DeRozan, and he still serves an immediate purpose for this team, potentially for the next 2 years, maybe 3 years, depending upon what it looks like. And then you still situate yourself to be a player, in case it does go horribly wrong. So to me, you're adding the right piece. The thing that gives me pause is having DeRozan and Domantas Sabonis on the same team, because you end up, it could potentially be very, very good, but it is undeniably two guys that are the most criticized in the league in terms of their style of play, and now you've put them on the same team. In my mind, two negatives in that sense could make a positive. What this team cannot do, though, is let him. I mean, look, every team he's been on, especially when the game is tight, and this is a good thing, we watch him dribble the shit out of the basketball and then ultimately find a way to score, which is fine, but they need that ball to move. I don't think there should be any pounding the ball into the ground. That's the one thing that kind of gives me a little bit of a, I don't know if this can work, but he will be a clutch player for this team. And I think it's exactly what they need. I also think I am curious to see what this means for other players, particularly with the likes of Keegan Murray, because of the fact that Mike Brown already has to yell at the guy to shoot the ball. And now he's got essentially three dudes with Malik Monk who absolutely, take shots. Domas is not really that type of guy late in games. But if you add, Malik Monk, DeMar DeRozan, and De'Aaron Fox, they are. So how does Keegan Murray factor into that? How does he grow without having this big tree kind of provide shade over him, as Jeff Petrie would often talk about? So the fit is, if someone wants to question it, I'm there, right there with you. I think it's going to be a fun situation for Mike Brown and his staff to work through, but it makes them better. It certainly makes them better. And I don't think they're done. I think there's still moves out there that they can potentially make. I don't think this is a finished product yet. And even if it is, like, I feel good about where this team is in terms of being better for next season, and trying to keep up with what's going on in the Western Conference.
Okay, so lots to unpack there. I'm going to say, for starters, I went and looked in like 3-point defense. Like, how bad is DeMar DeRozan? Because let's be honest, that was like the Achilles heel to the Sacramento Kings for the first 55 games of the season. They couldn't defend the 3-point line at all. Harrison Barnes allowed his opponent to shoot over 41% from three on the season. DeMar DeRozan held his opponent to 34% from three. Now, that can be because he's playing with better defenders like Alex Caruso or Patrick Williams. It could also just be that guys miss shots. There are a lot of reasons why, but on paper, DeMar DeRozan is equal to or better than defensively than Harrison Barnes. And I don't know why that is, but Harrison Barnes is a guy who is 6'8" and doesn't play like a guy who's 6'8", and DeMar DeRozan is a guy who's 6'6" and probably plays a little bit bigger than 6'6". So I'm okay with the defense. I don't think the defense is going to be outstanding and off the hook no matter who is right there, and it's on Mike Brown and the coaching staff to scheme away some of this issue. The other thing is Jay Triano was DeMar DeRozan's first NBA head coach. If there's somebody who knows how to fit him into this offense, it's going to be Jay. I think we're going to see the Kings get back to kind of go a little bit the way the Spurs went a few years back, where all of a sudden they're shooting in the mid-range a bunch. Because I think if you can redesign your offense a little bit to fit not only DeRozan, but to fit De'Aaron Fox into the mid-range again, and maybe even a guy like Keegan Murray, who's been working on his mid-range a bunch, that might actually make sense to sort of play a slightly different style of offense where it's not 45 3-pointers every game. I agree, Sean. It's a clear talent upgrade. The guy led the league in minutes played and minutes per game last year. He seems to be slaying father time just like LeBron James is. And so I think you're going to get value out of him the next 2 years and probably the next 3. The creativity that he brings, he's a guy who's averaging over 5 assists per game. You now have 4 guys who can average over 5 assists a game. And that's crazy because the Kings haven't had that at all. So you have playmaking all over the court. I do have some concerns about the 3-point shot and all that, like what Brenden brought up, but that's where it's going to be on Mike Brown to figure out guys that he can play alongside. It's why I think Keon Ellis becomes pretty valuable because as a fifth starter, he makes a ton of sense as a guy who might shoot the ball 6 or 7 times, and of those 6 or 7 shots, 5 or 6 of them are going to come from behind the arc. A true floor spacer and defensive upgrade. So I like the play. And the other thing is, for today, he's your third best player And I think the Kings last season, you could make the
He
argument
might
that
be your
Malik,
second.
He might be
yeah,
second.
yeah, Malik Monk was your third best player last year, and then it became Keegan Murray, and then a whole bunch of like who knows. You clearly now have like three really really high end players, and then a really really good player at number 4 in Malik Monk, and a really good player at number 5 in Keegan Murray, and then like I don't know how it spaces out after that. But I think that he's going to allow Keegan to grow into the player he should be, and it will give him the time to do that. And for the first year, I could see DeRozan averaging, 21, 22 points a game, probably not to 24, maybe cutting back a little bit, but seeing Keegan start to gain some confidence there. And then as we get closer and closer to DeMar DeRozan not being with the team, Keegan Murray will have his time to ascend. And the last thing I would say is, Sean, I agree with you. Like on the night they traded for DeMar DeRozan, like I'm sure you heard a lot of the same stuff I did, that they're still in on market and they're still in on Kuzma. They're still like going out there and trying to improve the team. But I think the good thing about DeMar DeRozan is he what you need now is different than what you needed before. You now have your third best player. You have another guy who is going to average 20 points a game, who's a total bucket. And so that means that even though I'm not the biggest like Cam Johnson fan, maybe Cam Johnson makes a ton of sense next to Keegan Murray, as a like two switchable forwards, and one guy just shoots threes, and the other guy's got a developing game, and then moving DeMar DeRozan to the two. I think it opens an avenue to find other players that won't just like come in and feel like they have to score. And so maybe that's something that, number one, guys who don't score as much are usually cheaper, and guys who don't score as much might also allow Keegan Murray to take these natural steps that we're talking about.
Well, and a little more to that point too. I think we've talked a lot about DeMar here and didn't talk about maybe the biggest thing he brings, which is something that the Kings sorely needed last year, which is free throw shooting. I mean, that guy can get to the line upwards of 7, 8 times a game. And if you think about that, free throws cost them a lot of games. I know, talking to De'Aaron Fox, I believe it was at his basketball camp, and how many games were just cost by free throws. I mean, my goodness, where would they be if they had, been a much, much better free throw shooting team? So that's not something, I mean, from a coaching standpoint, that's got to be the stuff that pulls your hair out, because that's obviously not really stuff you can totally drill and work on. Obviously, guys shoot free throws in practice, but you don't do so in tense environments with crowds all over you and you've had run up and down the court for 48 minutes. But it's he's a guy who's been there, done that, and there's not a lot he hasn't seen. And I'll say this, like, when I sat down with him, the thing that really strikes me is how, look, the Kings and DeMar DeRozan are kind of like on equal playing fields in a way. Both of them are trying to. You have players on this team that want to add to their legacy of being play on teams that can get deep into the playoffs. Obviously, strive for a championship, but even beyond that, like, sustain playoff success. And DeMar DeRozan has not had a lot of postseason success, so he's here. He is going to be 35 when the season tips off, and he still has a good portion of his career yet to be written, based off some of the aspirations that he has for being somebody who can play in the postseason and win. So that to me is exciting, especially, yes, there's a lot of mileage on that vehicle, but that vehicle it hasn't had a lot of dings to it. I mean, you don't have any really bad injuries in his career. He's very, very durable, and he's coming off of leading the leagues in minutes. That's really impressive to me. So you mentioned it, James, defeating Father Time. Yeah, and I asked Mike Brown. I mean, I don't quite love the answer that he gave me, because I think he was a little non-committal. I think everyone's looking at DeMar DeRozan and saying, we expect DeMar DeRozan to be DeMar DeRozan. But I wonder if he has to be that same guy. Like, does he have to be the same DeMar DeRozan we've all seen in previous stops as he comes here to Sacramento? I think he's going to flourish from a scoring standpoint, but I think he's going to mean much more to this team as a playmaker.
Mm-hmm.
I think the passing ever since he went to San Antonio is a really underrated skill of his. Mentioned the 0.5 offense the Kings play in. I think that he fits well in that. And just a little numbers on that free throw shooting, Sean, the 74.5% for the Kings, dead last in the league this year, 20.9 attempts, 21st in the league this year. And DeMar DeRozan by himself last year, 7.7 a game, 85.3% from the field, which I think also kind of goes with their half court offense, which was right around middle of the league last year. Like they're a great transition team. That's obviously what they want to do with the fastest player in the league, probably with Fox on their team, and Domas great at it. But 14th in half court points per possessions, just over one a game. And I think that DeMar obviously helps a lot with that. This is a team that I think could flirt with some of the most free throw attempts in the league between Fox, Monk, DeRozan. Sabonis gets to the line. Obviously, converting them will be a little bit of a different story, but maybe having a guy that goes up there and knocks them down helps the jitters with some of the other guys because they're good at it. Some of them just had low years for really inexplainable reasons. But I think that half court offense, and also there were a lot of times that teams last year went on extended runs that lasted just a few minutes longer than you really feel like they should, and could take the sails out of the Kings wins or extend a deficit that they're facing. And I think having somebody else aside from De'Aaron really being the main one to me that can say, okay, let's calm down, I'm going to get us a bucket here and sort of reset everything, can be pretty valuable.
Yeah, and adding to that, Brendan, the fact that DeMar DeRozan gets to the free throw line so often, those long runs, that's the best way to break a run. Is to go at the rim and either get the foul or get the bucket. And it's a way for, I a couple of years ago they had Zebo, which that team would have won like 18 games if they didn't have Zebo. And every time you needed someone to stop a run, Zebo would climb down into the post, raise his hand, you'd throw the ball to him, and he would score like 70% of the time. Like there is so much value in having a player like that. And I'll also add, like in crunch time, Fox was number one and DeMar DeRozan was number two in clutch time scoring last season, right? But the biggest difference is that in the clutch, De'Aaron Fox missed free throws. And I don't think you're going to have that as an issue. So if you are having a game where Fox has games where he's not hitting free throws. If he has one of those games and you get to a fourth quarter and it's tight, then feature DeMar DeRozan, feature Malik Monk, feature someone other than Fox, and use Fox as a decoy for part of it, but also take that pressure of him having to hit the free throws by just not putting the ball in his hands in every situation. He can still be a catch and shoot guy. He can still, on occasion get to the basket in that situation. But if you already know you have a problem that night with him not hitting free throws, just go to a different angle. And I think the fact that uh, like in closing lineups, you can go to three like star level like finishers in Monk and DeRozan and Fox. That's crazy. Like, how are you going to defend them in the clutch in the last 5 minutes of a game? They are going to be so difficult. And then on top of that, you got Keegan Murray as a knockdown shooter. On top of that, you got the best rebounder in the NBA, who is cleaning up things and getting putbacks. So I think they are going to be very difficult. I think offensively, I mean, they will probably be up there with one of the best, offensive teams in the league. And again, look at the numbers with Sabonis 8 assists, Monk over 5 assists, so that's 13. Fox at almost 6, so that's 19. DeRozan over 5, that's 24 assists per game. You're averaging 4 of your starters are going to average 24 assists per game, or 4 of your core. And that's wild. I mean, this team really should be able to move the ball and be one of the most like exciting offenses to watch in the league. So I'm down with it. And the other thing is I think it opens this door for Keegan Murray to quietly become the player he's supposed to be, not have this entire season riding on whether Keegan Murray takes the big leap or not, because that's where we were at like a couple of weeks ago. And I don't think that's where we're at today.
I think defensively they might be a little bit, but they could still be a very good team without it.
Yeah. I mean, defensively, I think they'll be a mess like half the time, but like that's what you got to figure it out, right? You still don't have a long, athletic shot blocker unless we're talking Orlando Robinson.
Robinson, yeah.
Yeah, unless and like again, I think at this point, at least you have a backup center behind Alex Len. But yeah, you still need to find that length and athleticism. That's why, like, again, I was probably, like, of all of the players out there, probably the least impressed with Cam Johnson as a potential guy that you go get. But now it's like, okay, Cam Johnson plays some defense. He's long, he's athletic, and he can really shoot the three.
You just talked yourself into it.
I may have talked myself into it because,
Yeah.
again, he's under contract for 3 years. You're not gonna have to pay him Brandon Ingram money. You're not gonna have to pay him Larry Markkinen money. You're not gonna have to pay the the expense to get either one of those guys is extreme. And, maybe you can make a move here and find a guy that like, just rebalances your roster, makes things a little easier, right? So,
I also think too, like in that regard too, because obviously, in order to get him, you're talking about someone like Kevin Herter, and somebody obviously, could be listening to this podcast and say, well, that's fine. He's coming off a terrible season, but make no mistake, man, that guy's a shooter, and you lose him to add something like that, and then you're looking around going suddenly, I don't know how we like our shooting on this Sacramento Kings team. So that's going to be a weird dynamic there, because can you do it without sacrificing some shooting? And if you do lose someone like Herter, are you able to get anything back that gets you makes you feel a little bit better with your perimeter shooting?
no, totally. Okay, let's get to a couple of small things. And I don't
All
want to
the
harp
small
on the
things.
yeah, I don't want to harp on these too much because like, who knows, like, what exactly the Kings knew and didn't know. But like, how concerned are you guys with Devin Carter missing at least 6 months? But, like, I had heard 6 to 8 months before. I heard 8 months a day before the draft. I heard 6 to 8 months like the day after the draft. But he's gone underneath the knife. It does look like it was a labral tear, and like they're saying January they're going to reassess him, but that doesn't mean that he's coming back in January. Um, how big of a deal is this for you guys? Going out and drafting a guy who's a little bit more mature, who you thought could step in and help right away, and who's not going to be available potentially for his entire rookie season.
Well, let's answer it with a question with a question. This question with a question. Let's pretend the Kings weren't picking where they were picking, and you had the 10th pick of the draft, and sitting with the 10th pick of the draft, right?
Mm-hmm.
Would you have selected Devin Carter?
If I knew he was going to be out of
if
here?
you knew about this injury, well, not a year necessarily, but I get you.
Well, 6 months at a minimum.
Yeah.
And by the time we get you see him back, I mean, who knows? Like January, February, March. I don't know. Maybe. But I also, like, I would have at least considered Dalton Connect. No? Brandon?
Yeah, sorry, I thought I froze for a sec. I would not. It wouldn't stop me from picking him, this injury, at all. Like, I still think that long term he makes a lot of sense. I think that he does all the intangibles. There were rumors connecting him to Alex Caruso, and I think that he kind of fits that mold in a way. He's a really disruptive guy on the defensive end. It is interesting to me that he played a lot of last season through an injury, and it's a shoulder injury, and given it's his left, but it was his best shooting season of his career by far, which is kind of interesting. But I think he's a guy that does a lot, and it certainly wouldn't stop me from picking him necessarily. He's got the length with him. He's got the same vertical at the combine as Malik Monk, by the way. Like, this guy really can get up. So it wouldn't stop me.
Yeah. I don't hate it either. I probably, like, I like Devin Carter coming into the draft. And again, when we cover the Sacramento Kings, we know exactly who they draft. Like, there were like 4 guys we're looking at who are all 21, 22 years old and have 2 or 3 years in college. Like, the rest of the guys, the Ron Hollands and stuff, we could talk about it, like, and wax poetically about how athletic and funny he is, but they're not drafting an 18 or 19-year-old. He's in a small bucket of players that you knew that the Kings were going to go after anyways.
Well, to me, it's I thought for sure he would be a top 10 pick, and the injury doesn't dissuade me from selecting him. But you mentioned Dalton Connect. I sure as hell didn't see that coming, where he was going to slip all the way down to the Lakers at 16, if I'm not mistaken. So
17.
17. Yeah. I mean, it's it's a puzzle, but I'm not worried about Devin Carter and his injuries. I like what he adds to this team. I like it even more, obviously, since they've moved on from somebody like Davion Mitchell. And I think this is, they don't have that glut anymore. They don't have that, people going, oh, what does it, what happens between the two of them? They made room. They made it work, and now he's your guy. It's not ideal. It's not ideal that he's going to miss a significant portion of his rookie season, but that's okay. To me, that's okay. You don't, I've never looked at drafts and thought, this person can impact right away at a like. Certainly, you'd like to see a guy maybe get in the running for rookie of the year, but where this team is, I never draft somebody based on I need this person to contribute right away. I don't look at it that way. And I think, Monty McNair talked about that. He says you don't draft for tomorrow. Today, you draft for tomorrow. So the fact that you're adding a talent like him and then you figure it out, the injury doesn't scare me at all. So if I had 10th pick, I would have probably taken him. The question, like you mentioned, James, would I have done it over Dalton Connect? Maybe, probably still would, but that's a question I legit asked myself. It's a question that they had to ask themselves when they were picking at 13, and obviously saw which way they went. But there was no way I saw him falling out of the top 10.
Yeah, and just so you know, I agree with you guys. Like I would have taken him too. But I was playing devil's advocate a little bit. Like it's still a question mark. Like you still have to at least discuss whether, drafting a player that you're hoping can contribute right away, but can't contribute right away because of an injury, whether you knew about or you didn't know about, I don't know. Still is a bit of a small red flag.
Yeah, it's not a knee injury. It's not something where he has to dramatically alter who he is as a player or how he plays on the court. I'm not to say that a shoulder injury isn't a very serious injury. It potentially can be, but for most basketball players, it's not. I mean, it's very simple to be able to continue and pick up where you left off.
Yeah. Let's get to the other one that's a little awkward. Sasha Vezenkov gets traded to the Toronto Raptors and then takes zero money and gets waived and moves back to Greece. I would. There's a technicality here that I'll talk about afterwards, but I think I'm comfortable with how this worked out. And you know what you know on June 27th or 28th when the Kings made that deal, and then what you know on July whatever, it's something different. And where are you guys at with the Sasha getting traded and then getting the buyout where, maybe the Kings would have had $6 million worth of cap space here to play with?
It's the money, I mean, that was him giving up that money was everything you needed to know. It wasn't something that, if they were going to take that step, and I don't know that would have been something that was entertained in Sacramento. Sacramento's a different organization than Toronto. Masai Ujiri and the situation that they're in is different than what Sacramento's in. So that may not have been on the table for Sacramento. Masai Ujiri, when you go to Toronto, that may have been a completely different situation over there. So the fact that that they were able to trade him, I think it's actually better for the Sacramento and kind of removing yourself from that headache. I see what you're saying in terms of the money that's there, but to me, this is someone they had high hopes on. So when he goes to the step of giving up that money just to be able to get out of the contract and go back, why stand in the way?
Yeah. Brenden?
Yeah, I don't think you can really place what went wrong, I guess, if you want to use that wording, with Sasha coming over on the Kings. Like, I think that he got opportunity. He had some unfortunate injuries that I think made the timing tough when he came back to then get additional opportunity to really catch a rhythm, get a feel for this offensive system and where he could potentially fit, sort of prove himself a little bit more on the defensive end. But I mean, it seems like he clearly wanted to go home. I think there's been rumors about him going back to Olympiacos, which has Philip Petrusev on it for what it's worth. So it might be a little Kings reunion going on over there. But yeah, I mean, I think that it's hard for me to place any of that on the Kings really. And Davion also obviously going out in that deal. I think that there just wasn't really much room for him when everybody's talking about the crowded front backcourt. And I think that Davion ended up being the one that was kind of the odd man out there, and obviously hadn't developed much since they took him in the lottery.
Yeah, I don't have any problems with the trade. And again, I hope that the Kings knew exactly what his plans were, or at least what his plans were when he was with Sacramento, like going back to Europe or not. But I think the one like asterisk I'll put on it is that you gave up 2 second-round picks to move his salary. And you traded Davion, like even if you would have just traded Davion straight across for Jalen McDaniels, I think fans would have been like, okay, whatever, that happens. You move off of a former number 9 pick, but he's no longer a number 9 pick. He's a dude on your roster. But it's when you have to give up 2 second-round picks. Those are future assets that you gave up to move him. And if you didn't know he was going to take a 0 buyout, you probably should have asked him repeatedly and asked if that's what he would do for Sacramento. At the end of the day, too, I'd point out that the Kings in that transaction, they came away with a $6.3 million trade exception, and we don't know what that will mean down the road, because as of right now, the Kings aren't a salary cap team. They're not a salary room team. They don't have a bunch of room to go play with. So having exceptions like that, they also picked up a $5.9 million exception
Yeah.
in the Chris Duarte deal when they sent him to Chicago. And so now you have all these exceptions that maybe one or two pieces during the season might fit into those things and actually help you out. So just something to keep in mind, that exceptions do have value. And you have the Sasha exception is right before the new calendar year. So it'll be good all the way up until like right around draft time this coming season. And then the Duarte one is going to be after the new year starts. So you have two exceptions, but they're good for a year, and it's from the date that the trade happened. So one of them can be used in this season. One of them you can actually hold out and use until next season if you want to.
And they can't be combined though.
No, they can't be
Right?
combined, but there are ways to like, again, always keep in mind that luxury tax and all that stuff, they're hard capped at 178, right? But up until like all throughout the season, it's a running total, and they don't count how much luxury tax or whatever you might owe until after the season's over and it's done with. So I bring that up because, like, let's say the Kings have to go $4 million over the cap, or let's say like 2.5 million over the cap. They signed a 3 or 4 million, or they trade for a player right now. They could always do something if Jalen McDaniels wasn't working out. They could waive him, stretch provision, free up $3 million in cap space for and then you'd lose like 1.5 and 1.5 in the next 2 years. But that would clear up $3 million and drop you down lower than luxury tax again. So there are ways to free up money, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Sean, you got to get out of here real quick. So let's just get to final thoughts. What do you got?
My final thoughts, put on the spot. Well, seeing Brenden in Vegas was quite an experience, and I wish we had more time to talk about it.
Is this the first time you've seen him in Vegas?
I don't recall.
He doesn't recall. He doesn't recall. I think he has a new level of appreciation for me, though. So
sure, I guess you could say
Yeah.
that. It's our second Vegas. My third year, I think, second time that we've hung out there. So yeah,
Okay.
if you want to know where to go, hang out with Sean Cunningham.
That's right.
Yeah, you
For
guys are
sure.
being all cryptic and crazy. Sweet. So that's your final thoughts, Sean? Brenden,
Yeah,
Vegas?
that, and I don't think I have anything Kings related from was able to, from a Sacramento standpoint, while I was down in Vegas. I do have an interview with Jared McCain. I'm working on for a story this week. Got to catch up with him. Anyone that's ever kind of kept up with him, as many millions of people do on his social media channels, just fun guy. But super committed to basketball as well. I mean, it's an interesting dynamic, and watching him work, I was able to attend practice out there, kind of catch up with Bobby Jackson, and they got Brian Gates and Rico Hines on that Philly team as well. So he's in good hands over there, and it'll be fun to watch what transpires. It was kind of fun to talk about his Sacramento roots, because even as a guy who was in high school, went to SoCal to basically prime himself for a NBA career and to grow as a basketball player and have the ability to do that is interesting. And what if that hadn't happened? Where would he have gone? How much does he really wear, the 916 on his chest? And how much is he looking forward to, actually stepping foot in Golden One Center for the first time as a NBA player? Would be kind of fun. So yeah, it was just it was fun to catch up with him. We didn't have a ton of time, kind of a little bit under 10 minutes with him, and but it was a lot of fun. Looking forward to seeing what he does in Philly.
All right, Brenden, what do you got for us?
Well, I've been busy. I'm the third-year head coach at San Jose State currently. We lost both of our bowl game opportunities, but my two-time All-American cornerback did just get drafted to the NFL. Yeah, NCAA College Football 25. I have been playing it like crazy, and San Jose State will win a natty eventually.
How much did you do that in Vegas, by the way?
A lot. That's when it came out, actually. Sean was on my ass about, you're really going to sit in Vegas and play video games. I'm like, yeah,
I think that
got out a little bit.
All right.
Yeah. I think that would have made you tired one day.
I'm not sure what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Cryptic. You guys are trouble. Let's see. Final thoughts from James. Number one, stay out of the heat. It's crazy. Number two, shout out to Mrs. Ham for putting up with me for 25 years.
That a boy.
Yeah, it's been an incredible 25-year run, and hopefully we got another 35, 40 in us. We'll see if I don't stop getting sick and back issues. So we'll see. But overall, yeah, sorry we haven't been around it nearly as much this summer. It's been a whirlwind, and so
that's on him. That's on that guy, right? Wait, I got to point this way. That guy.
It's on me.
Sean is the easiest scheduler out here. So
I did put it out to you guys a couple of times. Hey, could we do this? And you guys are like, oh, you gave me different times. They were like, okay, none of that's gonna work.
I've heard from people like, when are you guys gonna do your podcast? And I'm like, oh, it's James' fault, bro. I don't have
James' fault. Well, I got sick. Like I did. Like I had no voice. I felt bad. Sean and I shared an ice cream. Let's
settle down. Hold on a minute. Let's
bowl of ice cream.
Hold on a minute, front row.
And then I ended up with strep throat, so it wasn't Sean's fault.
I was good though.
I hope that I didn't get Sean sick. I called the first thing I do. I'm like, hey man, I'm sick. I hope you're okay. So I mean that cost me the last 2 California Classic games and all that stuff. I wasn't able to do anything. So all right, we gotta let Sean get to work. So thanks for tuning into the KINGSBEAT podcast. If you don't mind, give us a thumbs up. I don't know, subscribe to the channel. Give us a rating and review wherever you listen to podcasts. Join us next week. We'll be back again for another episode. We'll also I'm gonna work on an off the record with the KINGSBEAT virtual happy hour for next Thursday. Hopefully I can get that thing to come to fruition between now and then. So for Fox 40, Sean Cunningham and Brenden Nunes from the Kings Pulse podcast. Thanks for tuning in. I am James Hammy, Kings Insider for ESPN 1320 the KINGSBEAT. See you very soon.